just started to go, so they were right here, but everybody, you know, like in Canada especially, knew them, the summer breeze had hit. So we decided that Doug Martin was secretary then, they asked us to come up and put on a free concert. Well, they did this huge, if you knew Doug Martin, I mean, the man, he's a media man, he knows how to get it done, and I think the auditorium held like 12,000 people. And when I say it filled up. It was a free concert, but how many often can you get a group that still isn't a Michael Jackson to come? Because it's hard to give them their free than not, because they think it's free, it isn't any good. But anyway, we had this, and so after the concert was over, because when Jimmy Dash were playing colleges, I used to go around and get a room that was available, so that I would say, or have it announced on the stage, that Jimmy and Dash are going to talk about their religion, the Baha'i faith, in such and such a place, and the press is invited. And if anyone else would happen to like to come, well, you know, people about press, they come and just hear all their questions and ask, right? So, anyway, they did their concert, and you know, everybody was having such a great time, and then the concert was over, they did their encore, and they walked off, and I walked on the stage, and I said, just a moment, please. Anyone that is interested in hearing Sills and Crofts talk about their religion, the Baha'i faith, we're going to have an open press conference. The press is here. They want to know about it. So if you'd like to stay, you're welcome. Otherwise, they'll be waiting back, having a Coke or something, and for those that want to leave. Well, Jimmy Dash heard me announce this, and they, what did you say? Are you out of your mind? We can't go out on that stage and talk to all those people. They'll think we're Billy Graham, you know, we're the preachers. It was different if they're sitting around talking to the press, you know, but this was the major step into the halls. When Baha'i said, voice be raised in large assemblies. Yeah. And that certainly was the thing that many of us in my family envisioned, was just exactly that. That they would, after their concerts, give these. So they said, we can't do it. We're not going to do it. I said, okay, that's fine. Between you and Baha'i.
If you ever want to sing again.
I said, 10,000 people sitting out there waiting for you. I used to say to them, what if a person gets killed on the way home? Anything.
Yeah, it hasn't hurt.
They'll never have another chance. This would be their first chance. And boy, you're going to be held responsible. So anyway, I said, I'll go out and announce to the people that you can't do it, that I made a mistake. I should have announced it. I'm very sorry. So I knew him so well. So I very quietly started. Jimmy said, Marcia! Dash said, boy, you sure blackmailed us. And they went on and on. They were just furious. But they walked out on the stage and they gave the most brilliant fireside. There must have been 5,000 people.
And people start looking forward to it.
Oh, no, the promoters, see, that broke the ice.
Right.
The promoters, and then we used to, when they would go on a tour, the three of us, go into the studio and do a fireside. And I would pretend like I was the announcer, and we would talk about the faith, and I would ask them questions. Then that, with press releases and pictures, along with all the Glory Phasey books and 9 passes, and anybody's been on assembly during those 9 years that didn't get those 9 tickets, I don't think there's any out there. They got the tickets at the assembly, then they would get the press release, that Sills and Crofts played and such, and I'd leave a blank for them to put the name in. So we would actually write the press release, that they had, you know, hundreds of people stayed to hear them talk about the Baha'i faith, and then they would have the tape to take to the radio station. So they had everything laid out, you know, with the follow-up. And it got to the point where when the promoters would book them, they would always write to the office. I mean, invariably it got, are they going to give one of their talks? People are calling to find out if they're going to give one of their talks.
It's tricky. Whatever you say, whatever directions you say to do, I will do as much as
Right
I
now,
possibly
we are
can.
promoting an annual
Every direction.
media conference and art. You saw what the addition of the art.
Oh, yeah.
This first of all was the annual media conference. Then it became the media/teaching conference. And then it became, it's got to be media/art.
Well, it also gives people a glimmer of what the content inspires the folks at the conference and gives us a glimmer of what we can do in our own communities, but it also gives us that,
Absolutely.
that
It
vision
takes it
of-
out of the hardware
And puts it in
and
there.
puts it into the,
Content.
to the heart.
Arts and sciences.
Arts and-
You know, it's not that nobody's thought of that already.
Do you know something?
Yeah.
It's obvious that the South has to be the one to bring in the masses.
It's the
Because,
only
yeah, but you see, the seeds were planted in the 60s.
The
The
seeds
sacrifices that
in
were
the
made,
20s.
I came down here myself, I saw.
Are you aware,
In
it's
a
the
day Southern. You see, for years, and I'm sure many of you, if you hadn't heard it, but you've seen it in the movies, where the Southerner always said, save your Confederate money, the South will rise again.
Yes.
Well, it doesn't have that connotation.
No, it doesn't.
It's the spiritual raising.
It's the spiritual rising
of
again.
the South.
Yeah, and that is why we need this energy
Right.
here, this is why.
And
I'm
there is
going-
energy here. Our counselor
yes.
says things are percolating. You remember the old-fashioned coffee pot?
Yeah.
When you put it on the stove? This is what's happening throughout the South. Rhea Conham envisions that the day is going to come, and she says, a black, that's the way she says it, a black preacher. A black preacher is going to knock on the door of the Baha'is and say, we want in. And he's bringing his whole congregation.
Did you
We had
know,
that in Georgia.
we had it in, John Ross, Maxia here, after the youth conference, the three of us went to West Virginia on a teaching trip after the youth conference, what was it, in the 60s? We went to this little town in West Virginia, about, an hour out of Charleston, Beckley, I think it was. And it was on a Sunday, and so we said, let's just go out and teach. Let's go to a black church and tell them about Baha'u'llah. I doubt if any Baha'i ever been there. And we went around looking for a black church, and we found, somebody said, well, a minister lives there. We knocked on the door, they told us where the church was, and we went in the church. And they said, we talked to the minister and asked if we could read something to the congregation and read a couple of prayers. Well, here these three white people walked in there. I don't think there ever been a white person in that church. And so he said, fine. Oh, they were so sweet and wonderful. So anyway, John read a prayer and Maxia read a little short something, and I opened the Baha'i World of Faith and read the prayer to the tablet to the people. I don't remember what, but they were all so attentive. And did you know that the whole choir came over and we stood on the street and talked? Half that choir became Baha'is. Maxia stayed. And they
Where
had
was
that-
it? Where-
In
where?
Beckley, West Virginia. Campus, the gospel.
You know, that's the reason why I said this conference is a spring, because we got the satellite. Now it's time for the musicians and Baha'i musicians and music. And they be biting at the bits, but they said no way to do it. But now we have a thing, and the Baha'i choir, they're going to Russia, they're going to do a videotape. They came to LA and
The workshop now on the stage.
we raised something like 1800, what did we raise for?
And we've got to use the word
Everybody
Congress
for
choir.
our thing going to Russia, that will be on TV. We are going to get the tapes, and so our Nashville choir people who are, we're going to put that on the satellite. So that's another thing that's happening to feed our stuff for the satellite. That's why we have to. We have to
These
wait.
materials are just being provided. We stop and think about it.
You think about it,
Really
it's
gonna be
coming.
a
It's just
stuff.
get it all right in place.
But you know,
Oh.
with this music and how it built. And, you know, if you could have seen the faces of the audience. And when the gospel choir, people who I know personally, very dignified people who would never let any emotion. And when the choir started, they were up on their feet, throwing off their mink coats. It had done something to the spirit of the
You're
audience.
right.
You know, it's so funny because, you know, to think about an integrated Baha'i gospel choir too. The college where I'm working, you know, it looks like a third world, not a third world, but a global school, because it's not white. I'm definitely the minority there. Many of my coworkers are African American, and this one woman, she is so funny. She wanted to hear some of this music because she said, "What'd you do this weekend?" "Oh, I just got back from Atlanta." "Oh, what were you in Atlanta?" oh, I was singing a gospel choir up there, and we just sang to about 1,000 people. She said, 1,000 people? She said, what kind of choir are you singing? I said, gospel choir. She said, oh, gospel choirs are black. And I said, well, some of them are.
Misconception.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Gospel music isn't
Because you know
always black.
what Bob Henderson said at the end of the World Congress? He came backstage to specifically talk to the members of the gospel choir. He said, do not let this die. That they should go all across America having little satellite conferences with gospel choirs and so forth. And he said the most effective gospel choir he had ever heard, he said, you will never believe where they came from. They came from a Scandinavian country.
Oh, my goodness.
And he said, do you know why they were so good? Because they sang with conviction. And this is what happened with Lua. She sang that song with conviction.
How about my granddaughter, huh?
Yeah.
That's what I said. Whitney Houston, move over.
Her cousin, who is black, sings whiter than she does.
Same vision. And Abdul Baha said when he was in the United States in one of the assemblies in the major city, he looked out of the window at the crowd of people walking on the street. And he said, if the assembly were truly unified and loved one another, that love would act as a magnet and would draw the people in the street into the embrace of God. And we must truly love each other
Yeah.
and get rid of all this garbage that we have.
And it's that garbage that kills it all.
Ways-
But I think
This is very exciting to me to have these 4 satellite conferences to prepare for the annual one that we'll have next year. And radio will be concentrated at Radio Baha'i, the Louis Gregory Institute in Hemingway, South Carolina.
That's very appropriate since that's where it all began in this country.
Exactly. And, you know, I get so excited about the seeds that Louis Gregory has planted and to initiate this satellite conference there, I think will be very monumental.